What's good, YouTube? It's your boy Nehemiah, aka Neo, and today we're going to be talking about the Toronto Raptors. Honestly, this team is in a really prime position to make probably a trade or two, and I think that they probably should. Looking at their roster, they do have a competitive roster, I guess, but when we look at it deeply, we kind of see some issues. Fred Van Fleet, after the injury, I'm pretty sure he just wasn't the same player. He didn't really play nearly as good. Same type of thing with Gary Trent Jr. In the playoffs, he stunk it up. Like it took him like 14 threes to actually make a one. Really bad. And I think the only saving grace with this team was Pascal Siakam. But the problem with Pascal is that even in the playoffs this year, while he did play decently well, I think it's just shown that he may not be the number one option that this team needs, and honestly, that's perfectly fine. Just being completely honest, that's fine for a player like him. But I think that this team just lacks a number one option, and that's going to be really tough to see because Pascal is definitely the best player on this team, hands down. Even though he didn't make the All Star team this year, he was definitely better than Fred Van Fleet this year. And while this team does have a bunch of like bigger bodies, again, similar to the 2019 Raptors, the 2022 Boston Celtics, this team just has a lot of bodies on this team. However, if we really look at this like just from face value, it doesn't look the best, you know. Looking at their roster right now, let me just pull this up. They just don't have the pieces, you know. OG wasn't the best this season, even though he was still pretty good. Don't get it twisted. Scotty Barnes was a really good piece this year. Gary Trent Jr. again, solid piece. Precious Achua, excuse me, really good piece. Chris Boucher, Daddy Young, they're all pretty much like solid pieces. But besides that, man, like this roster just fell off in the playoffs. Like it was bad. It was really, really, really bad. And looking at it, the roster didn't really change, and they still just have the same amount of players, which is where I come up with my ideas for trades. This team probably should trade for rather one, a better number one option, or two, they should probably just commit to a style where it's more conducive to Scotty Barnes being able to grow as a player. Because I think that Scotty Barnes, once he's probably flourished as a player, is probably going to be the best player on this team. I think that Pascal, Fred aren't going to be nearly as good as his ceiling, and that could be something that we'll talk about. Now, I do think that people are saying that he's going to be similar to like a Giannis type of player, and while I do think that he plays similar to Giannis, I don't see enough of a comparison, at least physically wise, that makes him so that he's probably the best from, or he's probably like similar to Giannis, or at least could repeat some of the heights that Giannis could do. If anything, I think that he could probably perform like 70% of what Giannis does. But like, to be fair, Giannis is such a good defender all the time that it's just hard to really compare those two. But looking at this team, is there's just not that much overall. I just don't think that there's that much things to go after. Like if they really want to hunt like an eighth, seventh seed for the next couple of years, I think that this is a good roster for that. But I just don't think that that's a really good roster for just competing overall. So I think that they should just dive into a Kevin Durant trade. Now, I think that would focus on Pascal Siakam, and while I wouldn't say that that's a really good move for Toronto, I think that you still just probably just have to make the move, especially if we're going to, uh, if they're going to make a move for a guy like these guys. That being said, I think that we should just look at this as a whole. Uh, just really look at how a Kevin Durant trade would impact this roster. I don't think that they're the favorites to come out the East. No way. Even with Kevin Durant, no. I think that their defense is going to be fine, if not really good. Again, they were able to stifle the Philadelphia 76ers for 2 games, even though that they were down 3-0. They were the 10th rated defense last year. I didn't know that. But, of course, the Toronto team led by Nick Nurse, they're going to be good defensively. However, their offensive rating was just not the best. It was 14th. We have teams like the New York, or not New York, the Brooklyn Nets. We have teams like the Golden State Warriors who are just we just have better number one options through and through. And for the Golden State Warriors, they just have a better defense. So I think that they need to commit to a guy like Kevin Durant. So that being said, if they were to make a trade for Kevin Durant, Pascal, I think that they may have to give up Scotty Barnes though. I think that they would, and I think that that's probably the biggest problem with the team going forward. Do they want to focus on the now, or do they want to focus on the future? And personally, for me, I would try to focus on the future only because you just don't know how good some of the teams in the future will be. While you can kind of just guarantee that you're going to be set up for future success. You know, Gary Trent Jr. is going to be a really solid player going down. Otto Porter is probably not going to be that great only because he's going to age out. But Precious, he's definitely shown that he could really benefit from this roster. Let me just check some of these other guys. DJ Wilson, he's DJ Wilson, bruh. We don't need to talk about him. But besides that, I think that they could just make a couple moves for younger players. I think that they could just probably just tank one season and maybe just be the team like what's it, like the 1999 Spurs where they tanked for Tim Duncan. I think that they could do that. If they really didn't want to go for Kevin Durant, because I think that they don't want to be in the middle ground. I'll call this the Portland Trailblazers effect, where we're in the middle for so long, where you don't get necessarily better, but you don't get necessarily worse. You don't get a really good draft pick, or even if they're not a really good drafting team, they don't get really good draft picks, and they just don't get enough actual postseason success. And I think that's really problematic for a team like this, especially because they really need something like a really good number one, maybe a number two if you really want to talk about it. But I think that going forward, this team should probably prioritize one of Scotty Barnes or two, Pascal. But that's it for me though. There's not really much I really like talking about this team. They're really solid, but that's pretty much all I can say. So, yeah, it's your boy Nehemiah, aka Neo. I hope you guys are having a great one.